Then there comes a point in every dream where you stop asking whether it's going to work, and you begin noticing what it's asking you to become. A few months ago, I started sketching a painting. Before I painted the figure, I splashed ink across the canvas. The woman I'd drawn suddenly became someone else. The ink gathered around her head like strands of living hair, almost like tentacles searching for their own direction. The painting was nowhere near finished, but something unusual happened. For the first time, I wasn't curious about how the painting would end. I was curious about the ink, the medium. Since then, ink has always been a part of the story behind my paintings. But this time, I wanted it to become the story, the main character. I wanted to spend time with the part of painting I feared and loved the most, to understand its personality, its habits, its strange little quirks. I wanted to know why I kept returning to something that asked so much of me. If ink were a person, I don't think it would be reckless. It would simply refuse to live cautiously. Ink doesn't apologize. It doesn't ask permission before flowing. It doesn't hesitate because the edge might not be perfect. It simply responds to whatever it meets. Water changes it. Gravity changes it. Another color changes it. Yet, somehow, it never loses itself. It just keeps becoming. There's something about that which feels deeply alive. Working with ink makes me feel strangely free and equally terrified. Not because I think I'll ruin a painting, but because for a few moments, I can't hide behind certainty anymore. Normally, I sketch first, I plan, I know where the figure will go. This time, I decided to begin with nothing. No face, no body, no story, just an enormous blank canvas. It felt less like starting a painting and more like standing on the edge of a decision. Life had started to become a little bit repetitive lately, predictable, comfortable, and perhaps what I wasn't really craving was a different painting. I was craving a different version of myself. People often ask whether painting with ink is about letting go of control. I don't actually think it is. I still choose the colors. I choose where the water goes. I decide when enough is enough. But once the ink touches the canvas, it stops asking what I wanted. Instead, it asks me a different question. Now, what are you going to do? That's the question I think keeps pulling me back. Ink doesn't reward perfect planning, it rewards participation. Place acrylic ink onto dry canvas and it stands its ground. Introduce water and suddenly it begins negotiating. It spreads, it retreats. It borrows colors from its neighbors. Sometimes the colors make one another brighter. Sometimes they become muddy. Add alcohol ink and entire worlds begin opening. Tiny cells appear like microorganisms beneath a microscope. Pools of color split into branching rivers. Hairdryers push water into roots that stretch across the canvas like underground forests. At some point, the canvas becomes less like something I'm painting and more like something I'm witnessing. I think that's why I really want perfectly blended paintings. Perfect paintings sometimes feel like they've never lived. Ink carries evidence that something happened. Evidence of movement, evidence of uncertainty. Evidence of two things collided and became something neither could have become alone. Perhaps that's why I almost try to ruin my own drawings, not because I want chaos, but because I want something alive enough to answer back. One of my favorite paintings is called What Is Meant for You Knows Your Name. While painting it, a pool of ink separated beneath a bird I painted. The branching marks became movement in its wings. It looked as though the bird had just landed, full of life, energy, momentum. I could never have planned that. If I'd sat in front of the canvas trying to invent it, I don't think I ever would have. That moment taught me something. Beauty doesn't always come from making better decisions. Sometimes it comes from responding beautifully to the decisions you've already made. Some kinds of beauty only reveal themselves once we're already moving. And perhaps that's true of dreams too. Every painting I make, every story I upload, every YouTube video I edit, every morning I wake up and choose this path again. I'm placing another vote for a future I cannot yet see. Nobody can promise these paintings will sell. Nobody can promise this video will find the people it's meant for. Nobody can promise this dream will become everything I imagine. I used to think success belonged to people who had certainty. But I've realized that certainty was never the admission fee. Decisions are. Every meaningful life is built from thousands of decisions made long before the reward ever arrives. The strange thing about uncertainty is that you don't overcome it by waiting until you're confident. You become confident because you've practiced walking into uncertainty often enough that you realize you always find your way through. My mom taught me something about this without ever talking about painting. During her divorce, she came to live with me for a while. It was one of the hardest decisions and seasons of her life. She didn't know where she would eventually live. She didn't know what her future would look like. I watched her grieve. I watched her doubt. I watched her carry questions that had no immediate answers. And there were so many reasons to stop imagining beautiful things. But instead, she cooked. Every day she prepared meals that somehow nourished far more than our hunger. Then spring arrived. She asked if I could take her to garden centers. Soon my car was filled with flowers. Then my garden. What struck me wasn't that she believed everything would be okay. She actually didn't. But she planted anyway. The flowers weren't proof that her life had already become beautiful. They were her way of participating in beauty before she had any guarantee it would return. Seeds are a lot like ink. Scatter them on the ground and you can't be certain they'll grow. A bird might eat them, someone might unknowingly step on them, or months later, wildflowers bloom in colors you never imagined. Nature had never promised us straight lines. Flowers bloom, flowers wither, then something else begins again. The courage was never in knowing what would happen. The courage was always in scattering the seeds. For a long time, I thought ink was teaching me how to trust. Now I think it's teaching me something much deeper. Because every time I splash ink across a carefully planned sketch, a part of my mind panics. You've ruined it. What are you doing? Can you even save this? Do you know what you're doing? But another part of me confidently smiles. Let's find out, shall we? I've realized I didn't come back to ink because it makes beautiful paintings. I come back because ink commits. Once it lands, it belongs. It doesn't apologize for taking up space. It doesn't wonder if it should have flowed somewhere else. It responds, it adapts, it keeps becoming. I think every dream asks the same thing of us. To stop standing at the edge of our lives and become someone willing to leave a mark before knowing exactly how it will be received. Leaving my career, making paintings no one had promised would sell, uploading videos no one had promised would watch, choosing this path again and again. I used to think I was building an art business, but somewhere along the way, I realized something else was also being built. Me. Not a version of me who is fearless, but a version of me who makes decisions before certainty arrives, who protects her time, who says no more often, who commits more deeply, who apologizes less, who keeps placing another vote for the future she's seen in her imagination, even when the evidence hasn't caught up yet. Perhaps ink has never really been teaching me how to make paintings. Perhaps it's been teaching me how to make decisions. I once heard the saying, "The strongest steel is forged in the hottest fire." For a long time, I thought resilience meant holding everything together, pushing harder, enduring more, becoming tougher. But ink has taught me something different, and so has my mum. Strength isn't always about resisting change. Sometimes it's allowing yourself to be changed by it. To let life move through you the way water carries ink pigment across a canvas. To keep creating, to keep planting, to keep making the next decision. To keep placing another vote for a future you cannot yet see. Maybe that's why I keep coming back to ink. Not because it makes better paintings, but because every time it spreads across a blank canvas, it reminds me that life has never belonged to the people who waited until they were certain. It belongs to the people willing to leave their mark anyway. And somewhere between the ink, the paintings, the YouTube videos, the dreams that may or may not come true, I've realized the greatest work I've been creating was never hanging on the wall. It has been the lifelong making of the woman holding the brush.
I'm hushing the dog on the chain. I'm running up stones on the edge of the bank. Rally the troops for another refrain. I sing this softly to myself. I sing this softly